everyone, and I want to read a proclamation here. By the virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Bradenton, I do hereby issue this proclamation honoring the Bradenton Herald's 100th anniversary celebration day, February 7th, 2023. Whereas the Bradenton Herald is celebrating its 100th anniversary of being Manatee County's premier source of local news, from breaking stories to sports scores, and whereas in 1922, R.P. Spoonenbarger, publisher of the Bradenton Herald Weekly, and his partner, Robert W. Bentley, merged their newspaper with the Manatee River Journal to create the Evening Herald. Ultimately, in 1925, the paper was sold to the R.W. Page Corporation of Columbus, Georgia, and the new owners changed the newspaper name to the Bradenton Herald. Whereas the Herald has been the recipient of many notable journalism awards from the Florida Society of Newspapers Editors, Florida Press Club, and Excellence in Writing Awards from Night Cities. Among the newspaper's top stories over the decades, including the coverage of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge disaster, 9/11, hurricanes, and industrial groundwater contamination at Tallahassee. Whereas, for a span of 42 years, the Bradenton Herald had only 2 executive editors. Wayne Poston, who's here tonight. Yep. Joan Crowder. Each inspiring journalists to connect with their readers and keeping them informed of all issues impacting their community. Whereas the newspaper has long served as the essential watchdog reporting on local government activities, seeking to keep public officials accountable and keep the public informed. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Gene Brown, as mayor of the city of Bradenton, Florida, do hereby proclaim February 7th, 2023 as Bradenton Herald's 100th anniversary celebration day in Bradenton, and urge all citizens to congratulate the Herald for its continuation of building a greater city for all citizens to live, work, and play. Mayor Gene Brown. Thank you. And when you look back, something that, just congratulations, obviously, but you look at probably one of the biggest highlights of the Bradenton Herald, kind of comes full circle. They brought the article from the 90s of where City Hall and all the situation going on, and we're kind of coming back to that full circle of moving that City Hall. So thank you for what you do, and we'll continue that coverage on what the city of Bradenton and Manatee County will be. So congratulations, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
My name is Pam Tesseri, and I've been there 15 years. So obviously I've seen a lot of changes. I'm an account executive and a market lead, which means I just help with anything that, anybody needs within the market. Internally, externally, I'm their go-to person. Oh, I think it's exciting. I mean, it's, they've seen so much, and it's so important, the journalism and, what the paper does, and just, getting the news out there from back in the day when, it was really one of the only ways that news got into the community. So I think still today we're doing that, and, telling the important news that needs to be, local news that needs to be, out there in the community, holding people accountable. Oh, definitely. I'm, hyper local, believe in shop local, local focus, local involvement. I've been a member of the chamber the whole time. I'm involved in several different committees throughout the year, but right now I am past chairwoman of the BBC committee, so that's one that's close to my heart. join many of their events, attend a lot of their events. And obviously we have an award-winning chamber here, so we're fortunate for that. But just in general, a lot of, community involvement. It's so important for everybody, to be involved. And I think that's one thing that makes our community stand out is all of the involvement from, businesses on down to employees to, everyone in our community. Well, it depends. I mean, we really customize all of our campaigns, but the print is very local. It's very branding, just to get people to know about your business. And we love helping, businesses grow and expand and, become a local name in the community, but also digital-wise, because obviously things have changed so much. So we do a lot of very large digital campaigns, and we really just reach their target audience. So that may be through a lot of different products, that we have. So again, it's very customized to what our clients' goals are, and then we customize a campaign based on what their goals are. But being owned by McClatchy, we have 30, newspapers across the nation. So we really, I have clients that I've helped, in many other markets. So we really are cross-market advertising as well, and especially now that, we have a high focus on digital. So when I first started, I was really more of an order taker. Circulation was booming. It was crazy how, people just called us to be in the paper, and pretty much everybody was in the paper. And it was like, okay, I'm going to run a full page ad every week for 52 weeks. It was very structured, and here's your contract, you sign it. Now it's very different. It's very fluid. It's great if they want to run print ads, but digital is very fluid because we, again, customize and we'll do several different tactics for someone, but if we find that, digital TV is working the best and social media may not be for their needs, we move that money over to where it's working best. So I think it's great because the evolution of, digital, it's ever changing. And you have to be able to pivot, and we do that, I think, very well. And, we just really engage with our clients. So that we make sure that we're hitting all their expectations and continuously improving on their performance. So it's really, I have clients that I've had for the whole 15 years, and then obviously always getting new clients. So I think, again, so many things have changed that we used to break out into a lot of separate sections. We did special sections. And now I think newspaper readers, I really find that they read cover to cover. So I don't, know that it matters. It really depends on, again, who you're trying to reach. If you're trying to reach just the broad community, I think the main news is great. If you really are geared towards people who read the sports section, then we can put your ad there. So it varies. We have real estate, sports, different taste section. It varies, but I think you can't go wrong because I do believe that newspaper readers, they're loyal and they read it cover to cover. So I think just that it is still, people think newspaper, people don't read the newspaper anymore. In our community, they do, but a lot of people are choosing to read it digitally versus the print edition of it. But I think, mainly that how engaged, and how affluent our audience is that reads the newspaper. They're very engaged, and we're still a loyal, trusted, local news source. And 100 years old.
Okay, well, I joined the Bradenton Herald in October of 1999 and came here actually as a night city editor. And so after I've been here about a year and a half, the East Manatee editor left. At that time, we had an East Manatee edition. And so I shifted out east, and we had a zoned edition. And that's what I did for 13 years, And then 2013, I retired for 6 months. It didn't work out, and came back in October of 2013, doing editor work 1 day a week and then a couple of days a week as a reporter. And after a year or so, I became a full-time, not a full-time, but a reporter all the time, editor none of the time. And nowadays, I'm working part-time, but 4 days a week.
Well, I got into the business because I felt that it was meaningful work, that it was a service to the community, provided vital information that you couldn't necessarily get anywhere else. And not for the money, because there's not a lot of money, but that really worked out to be the case. It's work that I've deeply enjoyed. I've enjoyed the contact with the people, socialization, learning something new every day, and every day is different. I think that I think in some ways that newspapers will continue, hopefully for another 100 years or beyond. Well, I think all of those things that you mentioned are important, and the work that I do pretty much will touch on all of those at some point. Maybe most of them in one day. Really, growth and development has been one of our master narratives since I've been here. Because it was incredible. A lot of people were saying when I first started that it's now the Bradenton area, Manatee County's time to grow, when they were seeing Fort Myers and other areas growing so fast. But really, we didn't see anything at all compared to what we're seeing right now. We're just one of the fastest growing counties in the state, and huge challenge with infrastructure, with roads, and keeping up with all that growth, and in an organized way, finding a place for those folks to go, find affordable housing for our workforce. Well, all of those stories, everyone has a story, whether they're a veteran or not, and they're often fascinating. I mean, everyone has something that's really remarkable about them. Today I did a story on a young woman who started a baking business. She had to during the pandemic because she lost access to child care. A lot of those were closing during the early days of the pandemic. It seems like a long time ago, but it was 3 years ago. Fascinating. And as a veteran myself, I know that we all have stories to tell. There are some similarities, but every veteran has a different story. If you go back to Vietnam, that was my era. I've got a story, and every Vietnam veteran I've ever met has a story. And I think it's important. We don't want to forget history, and we want to remember the contribution of those veterans, whether they're World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, and we need to remember those stories. Okay, we are constantly scanning, looking for news. There's sources that we contact. There are websites. There are different areas of news gathering that we go to. But an important part of that is the people themselves, the people who reach out to us and say, with an issue, a challenge, a complaint, and that makes it so much stronger because all the eyes and ears make it a better paper, a better report. Well, it's challenging working with them. Trying to, when they're that smart, that sharp, and you can't really get ahead of them. And it's always a challenge, and you think you've done a good job. And with Joan Crowder, a great editor, that had a really, some would say that she was a frustrated city editor, because the Metro editor, but she was the executive editor. But she was always so involved. She would even take a look at the last paper, before it went to the press at night. And and when you thought you could do all you could do possibly with that story, she would take that stick and raise it a little higher, and then you would somehow you would find the means to jump over it and make it even better. I had my first newspaper job before I went in the Army, just for a few months, at Florida Times-Union in Jacksonville, working as an apprentice pressman. And then, but I've been at it pretty much since 1977 after I left the Army. And there's been a lot of revolutions in technology, from the hot print, the linotype, the melted lead, to the first computers. But when I got into it, we were, my first professional newsroom, we were still on typewriters. And it wasn't until a few years later that we got mini disc terminals. And that was interesting. And so in the 90s, we saw the digital age coming on, and the websites, news websites. And what it really does is you have to get used to the idea of digital first. And after a while, you like it, though, because it gets the news out there so quickly. And also the reach is around the world. It's not just in Bradenton anymore, but if someone in Australia wanted to read about, a new Bradenton restaurant, they can, or the kiwi, the kiwi seafood, they can read it right in the Bradenton Herald on Bradenton.com. So it's faster, we have to keep up with the technology. Reporters are doing, in many cases, writing the story, writing the headline, taking the photos, maybe even doing the video. So all of that. I think the Bradenton Herald provides news that they can't get anywhere else. It's the folks that I work with are talented, they're dedicated, they're hardworking. It's hard to emphasize that too much, but they're really, and again, they're not doing it for the money because it's not there, but it's a real calling, and it's important work for the community. I think it's going to be more and more digital, and I mean it's kind of hard to forecast, but I really think that at some point that print will be with us. I don't think that print will ever go away, and it may be surprising the forms that will take in the future.
My name is Ryan Callahan. I am a senior reporter with the Bradenton Herald newspaper. I've been with the paper for 5 years now. I cover county government, politics, city council, pretty much anything that comes my way these days. That's a great question. I think just keeping the public informed about what's going on around them. Obviously, there are lots of ways to get information and news these days, but having a trusted source like a newspaper that's been around for 100 years is invaluable. And so I think that what we do at the Bradenton Herald is of great significance and importance to the community. Yeah, so obviously a story starts with an idea, right? And from there, it can go all sorts of ways. But doing the research and the interviewing required to get the facts right is probably the biggest part of the story. Sometimes that means talking to people. Sometimes that means looking up previous articles from the Bradenton Herald. It goes all over the place. But in the ordinary course, it's the interviews, and from there, you gather what you've learned. Then sometimes you rely on previous experience, and you come up with a story that hopefully teaches someone something new about what's happening in the world today. I mean, I think we provide an incredible service to the citizens. There's, for instance, myself. I cover government meetings, which are not very well attended. But because there's someone like me there, and whether that's me or a different reporter, we're there to share the things that residents can't hear for themselves all the time. You can stream the meetings, you can watch them, however is easiest for you. But having a reporter there to understand what's going on and report that to the community really is very important. Being digital and we like to think of ourselves as digital first. It really means that we can be where you are, So, the news isn't strictly limited to, the paper that lands on your doorstep at 6 a.m. If news breaks at 10 o'clock, we can get that to you through Facebook or Twitter or a video, So, we're out there. We're doing the news no matter what time it is, really, So. Going digital really has been quite the revolution for the newspaper business. I think in the future, so traditionally, obviously, papers have been on paper, and that's largely what people think of when they hear the word newspaper. But I think, we're shifting to be more and more online, and not just online as in an article that you read on your phone, but, videos, there's experiments with audio, there's, Instagram, there's Twitter, we're becoming, jacks of all trades in a sense that, it's not just that we write words, we take pictures, we tweet, we do on-camera interviews. So, it's really about getting information out to people how they want to consume it. as opposed to, you know, the old days where it's just, you know, this paper that lands on your doorstep. You know, I think the first and foremost, I would say that we can't do this without our subscribers and our readers. You know, so I think we do an incredible mission, and we try our best at it. And you know, it's not always easy, and I think people get that. But you know, having their support really does mean a lot to us. You know, and I guess I think it's just that. You know, it's that we, you know, it's almost like they feed us and we feed them in a way. You know, that sounds kind of cheesy, but you know, without them we can't do what we do, but we love doing what we do. So you know, the support is nice, but even without it, we're gonna keep doing what we do best. So I've only been here for 5 years, but that feels like a really long time. You know, so much has changed since I've joined the paper. And that said, I've got a little bit of a knowledge about the Bradenton area. What really fascinates me is peeling back the layers into the Manatee County's history, and really taking a look at how things got to be how they are today. So that's something that's always fascinated me. You know, I'm not a native to this area per se. I was raised in St. Petersburg, but you know, taking a look at the archives of the 20s, the 30s, the 50s, the 60s, that kind of stuff. I think there's always a place for history in today's news.
You know, the Bradenton Herald has such a rich history, starting with the Evening Herald and the Manatee River Journal back in the early 1900s, that this paper took over, and has been such a rich part of the history of Manatee County and the city of Bradenton, because early on they covered everything that went on in Bradenton and Manatee County, including all the high schools and all the schools. And I have been involved in the Boy Scouts, and in the early days, the Bradenton Herald had a page on scouting, and every issue would have news on what the Boy Scouts are doing in Manatee County. So it really, the Bradenton Herald has covered the history of this area so strong, and without it, that history would be lost. And as I have been doing my local research and writing, I go to the Bradenton Herald consistently because they covered so much that you're able to put together events that otherwise would not, you know, be covered at all. And recently, when I was researching the Manatee County Bar Association in the early 1900s, I was able to find that the first bar president, John Gillespie, named the front palm trees in front of the courthouse the Buzzard's Roost, because the Bradenton Herald wrote about that story that otherwise wouldn't have been covered. And so it is so important that the Bradenton Herald has been a part of Manatee County and Bradenton, and I don't know what we would do without it. Well, what's been interesting about the Bradenton Herald is each of the publishers, who incidentally 2 or 3 of them were the presidents of Bradenton Kiwanis, made sure that the newspaper not only covered the news, but was engaged in the community and was a citizen, in fact, of the community. So they were involved not only in covering the news, but actually being part of the news and contributing to and covering it extensively, many, many important events in Manatee County. Well, yes, I do, and of course we all used to love to go out and get our newspaper in the morning and have that piece of paper we could read and hang on to. And if you're like me, you would cut out articles or save articles that were in print. Of course, it's now changed so much because it's digital plus the paper, but the digital covers so much more. And in fact, nowadays, what has been great about it is, of course, is that two things. One, you can be in another location, whether you're on vacation or business, and then you can, if you have a subscription, of course, you can read the paper, the electronic edition. But one of the other important things is the preservation of the paper and the records now is on digital. So all of the stories that are written now are preserved. And they've got the link, of course, that you can take an article and save it, download it, save it if you have a subscription. And that's what's so important. Now that it's on digital, it won't be lost. It won't be burnt. It'll be there. Well, 100 years is such a significant number for this great paper to have been around because those of us that grew up here, those of us that have lived here a long time and our families, we can go back and learn so much about how we grew up, how it affected all of us, and really have that experience again. We can relive it by having this paper that's been here for 100 years.
Well, it was an interesting story on how I got to the Herald in the first place. I came out of the service, and I needed a reorientation to the society, so I went to graduate school at the University of South Carolina. And one of my schoolmates there, was coming to Bradenton for an interview, and he decided to go to law school. So I just drove down and took his spot. Then they hired me. I actually, it was privately owned company, and a man named Alva Chapman, who was part owner of that, divested himself of his part in that. And I knew that there was a sale coming, and I didn't want to be inherited. So I went to Roanoke, Virginia, and worked there about a little over a year. And the people, night newspapers, then bought the paper. And they kept calling me and asking me about people who worked there and this and that. One thing led to another, and I finally said, why don't you just come to work for us? And we did. And this Alva Chapman, his father was the publisher of the Bradenton Herald. And so I had to interview with him. I had to interview with two vice presidents and the executive editor of the Miami Herald. Oh, absolutely. It was crazy. Newspapers in those days were selling for 26 to 28 times earnings. Big deal. I mean, it was a big thing. I mean, I had 100 people in news. Had a full-time Tallahassee bureau, full-time Washington bureau. So we had a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, we printed the paper and did everything. Built a new building during that time. That was all fun. Well, we were a small newspaper, but I told my staff and told anyone who would listen, we're not going to act like we're a small newspaper. we're going to do everything we can do to be as good as we can be. We hired great people. We had an internship program with Berkeley in California, and we would have interns from that group. And so we won every national award you could possibly win, except for the Pulitzer. And on the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, when that came down, the St. Pete Times beat us out, but we were in the running. Joanne Mamenta is here this evening. She was my managing editor. Shirley Ford was my first managing editor, and she was the first woman managing editor of any newspaper in the state of Florida. Yeah, Paul Bartley was one of a kind. And when Paul left and he was running his photography business, he was very successful because he had Tropicana as a client. And Paul was retired, and I called him and I said, what are you doing? He said, not much. I said, well, come to work for me. He said, doing what? And I said, I don't know. We'll figure it out when you get here. Well, that's the only reason you could get the news and get it. You had to be invested in the community, and if you did that, then the community got invested in you. And we sold newspapers that way. But I always think that the key to making any business successful is leadership. And I've always been involved in leadership. I'm Leadership Florida Class 2. You got to live your community. That's what you have to do. And even the reporters and editors we brought in, that's one of the things we stress. You're now here, do your best. Let's make it happen. Well, because that's where they go. They no longer, used to be, people would wake up in the morning and first thing they would do is get the newspaper and a cup of coffee, and that's what they did. You know, and they don't really do that anymore. They do it in a different kind of way. But you still got to get the news out to them and do that. I tell you, I'll give you a story that relates to me as being mayor and relates to me as Bradenton Herald. So just when the computer era was starting to come in, I found a guy selling domain names, and he bought a bunch of them. And one he bought was Bradenton.com. So I thought, we need this, and I'm going to get it. But I called the mayor of Bradenton, Bill Evers, and said, look, I'm going to buy this domain name, but I want you to have first shot at it because you're the mayor of Bradenton. He says, this business about computers is just a flash in the pan. They're not going anywhere. I said, so you don't want it? He said, no. So I bought it for $2,800. I bought Bradenton.com. I wish we still had news in the way we do news. It's not there now. It's in a different way. Much of the news that we see these days is entertainment, not really news. And that's what it's about. So back in the day when I was there and all of these folks were working, we delivered something that people needed to understand. And that's what we were given. And so they could count on us to be true, respectful. And I told my guys, all their computers in the newsroom in Bradenton said, write it bright, write it tight, and write it tonight. So that's what we did. We worked hard to get that done, but I've been blessed in my life. I got out of the newspaper business just before it went downhill. I got out of politics just before it went downhill, so I'm 2 for 2, baby.
A tremendous history that has been reported through the Bradenton Herald. One of the things that I always cherished so much about their publication was really the youth programs that they would highlight, and of course the Golden Herald Awards. Those were outstanding. I was a judge many times over, and I felt so honored to be able to talk to the young people. I just loved it, and I kind of had some questions that I came up with that I would ask them consistently. Like, my favorite question was, who helped to make the person sitting in front of me today? And you would be surprised at the answers you got. But 9 times out of 10, it was the mom. Well, because I think if your information, your news media is from too far, it's too remote, they're not going to understand the common core, the issues that really are meaningful to the local community. So I think that's lost just by spreading it further and further away from the source of the news. Well, I really think that there seems to be a lessening of the reporters that are covering some of the government entities, and I think that's critical because some are published, they're on television and so forth, but it's not the same as having someone sitting there and kind of interpreting and explaining through the news media, through the paper. So I think that's always been helpful, the opinions and so forth. So it gives different perspectives. It is and it isn't. I think things are they're too quickly thrown out there. I think a lot of times things are not verified, validated, and it's just at first blush. And I think that because so often what happens is the first person that tells you the first thing you hear, and then you can't get that out of somebody's mind. So they go off with the wrong message. I would say it's important to support local. In anything else, it's critical to support local because it's just like the Bradenton Herald. They put together the Golden Herald Awards. They felt that was important enough to try and shine a light on the young people. And so, yet again, it circles back to what's important to the community. And for me personally, it's the youth because those are tomorrow's leaders.
Right. Well, when you think back of the history of the Bradenton Herald and the people that have been there, and, of course, my mind goes right to Gene Page, the son of the original purchaser of it from many years back. But Gene Page was always a great friend, but was a great community person, and that's what this paper was about, the community. And, being in politics, it's a little different, but I'm impressed with the way the paper has changed with the times. We know there's not as much print, but they still do put the information on. And one thing I've always said, and when I got into politics, especially 10 years ago, is I'm very impressed with the way their reporters have always printed the news, not made the news. And that's what I've heard through the whole history of the Bradenton Herald. They really print it to get out to the citizens what was going on. Well, it's important because they're giving the information to the town, what people want to see. And then you mentioned a lot of things, but sports. Think about the sports in this town over the years when we've got state championship football teams, state championship baseball teams, state championship cheerleaders, a lot of different, all sports out there. And you know what? On Saturday mornings, you go buy the paper to look at the sports for some people. You go live, different things. Obviously, there's the whole cross-section of what the paper is. And unfortunately, as that dies out, you hope that, like our Bradenton Herald, will continue to strive to do that, even though it's not as much in print. It's online now, and it's proud to be that newspaper that is continuing to grow. Well, obviously, we're all a digital world now, and it's really about the phones you have because, we all have, I don't like computers, but what I carry in my pocket is a computer. It's the phone, and I can look right now, pull it up, and I've got put the Bradenton Herald, and it's right in my eyes right then. And I think it really works well that you can keep up to date what's going on, and also it gives people the opportunity to know what's going on in a town. And I think we do lose that a little bit without the print newspaper. When there was 100 and some thousand print newspapers out there, whether you wanted to see it or not, you saw it laying around. And we do miss that a little bit, but it is still there. Now it's hopefully, this can continue on, that they don't eventually go away. Well, I just like to say thank you to all those that came before for this newspaper, and thank you to the people now. But I think if you really look back on the history of Bradenton, the Bradenton Herald has been a part of it for 100 years, and really, the city of Bradenton's 119 years old. We're going to continue to grow, and hopefully they'll be a part of it, because the city's not going anywhere. Hopefully the newspaper won't go anywhere.